So, hello then, welcome back to yet another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spy Knight, and in these podcasts I talk all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing Poor Things. But, just before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers, but prefer to listen to your podcast on Spotify, well, even look, as you can also listen to this podcast on Spotify at Night of the Movies on that platform, and if you are already listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check this podcast out visually. Yes, you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the podcast, of course, and please leave me with some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there are always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. So, let's get into it, shall we? Poor Things. So this film stars Emma Stone, Mark Ruffalo, Rami Youssef, and Willem Dafoe, and it's directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, apologies if I mispronounced his name there, who previously directed the likes of The Favourite, which came out in 2019, and which I watched a couple of weeks ago for the first time, and didn't really like, I've got to be honest. He also directed The Lobster, which I haven't seen, and he directed The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which I have seen, and I also didn't like. So, when I saw that he had made this film and it was coming out soon, I wasn't that interested, I've got to admit. That was until I heard all this Oscar buzz surrounding this film. All these people had already seen it in America, because it's already been out in a couple of months, it's already been out for a bit in America. I don't know when it came out, but I think it came out a couple of months ago in America. But so yeah, I'd heard all this buzz surrounding the film from people who'd already seen it in other countries and at premieres and whatnot, and I was thinking, wow, maybe this might actually be the first Yorgos Lanthimos film to work for me, because I'm always ready for a director's work to work for me when it hasn't before. I still remember watching Hunt for the Wilder People for the first time, like last year or the year before that, and I hadn't been a fan of Taika Waititi before watching Hunt for the Wilder People, and I watched that and I was like, oh, this is great. I understand why people like Taika Waititi now, even so I don't really like some of his most recent films. So you get the point I'm making. I'm always ready for a director who I haven't really liked their work in the past to impress me now, so that I can actually understand what all the fuss is about. And I was hoping that was going to happen with Poor Things, and I really liked the look of the cast. I mean, Emma Stone, I've loved her ever since La La Land. She was so good in that film, and that's a film I watch every year because it's so, I just think it's perfect. I love La La Land to pieces, and I think she is one of the best parts of it. Her and Ryan Gosling's chemistry in that film is brilliant, and you look at her performance in that, and then you look at her performance in something like Superbad or Easy A, and then you look at her performance in the Amazing Spider-Man films, and you just see how versatile she is as an actress. And I just, you know, her performance in The Favourite as well, another Yorgos Lanthimos film, and people were saying some absolutely incredible things about her performance in this film, which also got me excited. Plus, Mark Ruffalo and Willem Dafoe, I love them too, even in films that I don't really like I'm not a big Marvel film person, I don't really like the MCU movies, but whenever Mark Ruffalo pops up in an MCU film, I usually enjoy him in it, which tells you how good he's an actor. And I love him in Zodiac, I love him in Spotlight, and Willem Dafoe, I mean, he's Willem Dafoe. you know when Willem Dafoe is on screen in a film, and just he got that presence and that dominance that only he really brings to a movie. And yeah, when I heard they were in it, I got even more excited. So, you know, with the cast and the Oscar buzz, I was really looking forward to seeing this film, even though I haven't been a fan of Yorgos Lanthimos' films beforehand. And the Google plot synopsis for Poor Things goes as follows. Brought back to life by an unorthodox scientist, played by Willem Dafoe in the film, a young woman runs off with a lawyer on a whirlwind adventure across the continents. Free from the prejudices of her times, she grows steadfast in her purpose to stand for equality and liberation. And that's basically all you need to know about Poor Things. feelings before seeing it. And honestly, I did not like this film. It was not for me. However, I do not think it is awful. There is so much to admire about this film. There really is. I mean, just off the bat, Emma Stone's performance is tremendous. It's simply astounding what she does in this film and how she plays Bella, the protagonist in this film, the character that we follow. I mean, you look at Emma Stone in the likes of Easy A, Superbad, the Amazing Spider-Man films, I mean, La La Land, and there's so many other films I'm forgetting off the top of my head which I've seen her in right now, but still, you watch in all those films and you see how versatile she is as an actress. And the thing is, she brings out all the performances in those films, in this film, and more. She does everything we've seen her do and more in this film. And again, as already mentioned, she is utterly incredible in this film, giving off such versatility and giving off such complex emotion that I was really drawn to her in this film because of how good of a performance she gives. She is just utterly remarkable in this film. Utterly remarkable. Mark Ruffalo is also very good and he's very funny in the film at times, and he does a very good job playing this sleazy lawyer. I think he was very good, and Willem Dafoe does a very good job playing this creepy Frankenstein-like character, you know. And what I really liked about his character was that Willem Dafoe plays it in a very creepy fashion, but then as the film progresses, he adds subtly, he adds some emotion and he makes you care about his character towards the end, and I liked that quite a lot. And Rami Youssef, who I haven't really seen anything else, I've got to admit, he was really great as this scientist who is like a bystander on the whole situation. He's just looking into this, to how Willem Dafoe's character is raising Bella, Emma Stone's character, and he's watching in on it and he's observing a lot of it, and he plays it really innocently, and I really liked the way that was done. I really liked Rami Youssef in the film. I really liked the decisions with Rami Youssef's character and how he played it in the film. Also, it's clearly from a visionary director. I may not like Yorgos Lanthimos' directing. I think it's a bit too arty for my liking personally, but I can admire what he is doing. And I always like it when a filmmaker has a vision and you can tell that they have a vision. I mean, there are so many aspects of the film which I just loved looking at. You know, I didn't particularly like watching the film, and I'll go into that a bit later in this podcast, but I liked looking at the film, if you follow my thinking. You know, whether it's in the very twisted and peculiar and absorbing vision of the film, you know, which you really get in the production design, where the sets, you almost want to go and explore them. I mean, they're not tactile sets, but at the same time, it's like, wow, you can just look at the sets and the background of these shots in the film and you can just tell the amount of care and thought and passion that has gone into the design of the film, and that's something I really admire about it. There's so much to admire about the film. I mean, not only in the performances and the set design, but also in the prosthetics. You know, there's prosthetics on Willem Dafoe's face throughout the entirety of the film, and I never once believed that they weren't real. That's how good the prosthetics are. And it's a very imaginative film. It's very creative, sometimes a little too imaginative and too peculiar for my liking. Like, this film feels like it's come out of Yorgos Lanthimos' imagination, and I don't mean that in the best way, but I admired, again, the imaginative and absorbing look of the film. You have these animals in the film which are made up from two different animals, which was something I never ever thought I'd see anywhere. You know, not only just in film, I never ever thought I would see these mixed breed, I mean, they're not even mixed breed animals, it's just like animals that have been sewn together, two different types of animals. And I mean, they look real in the film, and I don't know how Yorgos Lanthimos thought of putting animals like that in the film. It's just something which I could never think of. And I mean, the whole film itself is very peculiar and very imaginative, and I admired it for that. I thought it was a little too imaginative and fanciful, but I admired Yorgos Lanthimos' vision and how he brought it to life, because it does seem that this is the film Yorgos Lanthimos wanted to make. Like, I'd be very surprised if I heard in a couple of months' time that this vision was compromised for the film, that Yorgos Lanthimos had a producer telling him to stop doing things whilst he was making the film, because it feels like Yorgos Lanthimos got to make the film he wanted to do, got to make the film he wanted to, and good for him, Good for him. Personally, though, I don't like his films. I can admire the craft of someone's work, but still not like it. One thing I don't really like about Yorgos Lanthimos' directing style is how he'll go from frame to frame and completely change the lens and the look of a shot. And I find it really unengaging when he does that, because I'm trying to adjust myself to the new shot type which is being used for this moment in a scene. I'm like, okay, I'm just adjusting to that. Oh no, he changed shot again, and it really, I find it unengaging. I find his style of filmmaking hard to get into, and because of that, I struggle to get invested into the storylines in the film and care about what's going on and find anything too compelling. Emma Stone is compelling in the film, but I think I found her compelling because of her performance. I didn't really like her character too much, and the journey her character went on, I felt there was a little too much sex and nudity. A little too much. Now, some of the sex and nudity in the film is warranted. I do think does serve a purpose to the plot of the film, but there's a hell of a lot of sex, to the point that I actually had my head in my hands at one point in the film, because I was like, really? We're having another sex scene? We're having another sex scene here, and Emma Stone is getting nude again? I mean, again, I think some of the nudity and some of the sex scenes are needed. I understand why they're in the film, but there is so much sex and so much nudity that it gave me a really uncomfortable viewing experience, particularly in the cinema, and it really put me off the film. I don't mind some sex in movies, but this film has a lot of sex in it, and I get that might be because it's art. This film is a very arty film, and art in the end has a lot of sex and nudity to it. I understand that this is a very arty film, but that still doesn't mean that I have to like it. It felt like the film was too stylized too, because it felt at times like the filmmakers were more concerned with the style of the film rather than the characters. There were a couple of moments where I was like, actually no, delve into the character moments there. There's a part of the film where Emma Stone's character, Bella, gets quite upset, and I was like, oh, you're touching on something quite interesting there, and then it just gets into being all stylized again and arty, and I'm like, well, you could have done something more with the characters there, you could have done something more with the narrative there, but instead it just tried to be comedic all over again. I didn't find the film that funny. It had some funny parts, but I didn't find it that funny really, and I felt that it was also a bit of style over substance. Actually, I wouldn't say it was a bit of style over substance. I'd say it's quite a bit of style over. I would say it was actually quite a bit of style over substance, in my opinion. The film itself is very arty, and I don't like arty films. I simply don't. They annoy me because they feel very pretentious, and this film does feel very pretentious. It feels like you have to be a certain type of person to understand the film, to get it, and if you're not, then you're left out of the crowd. You're left out of the group, and the film then becomes very alienating. That's what it was like for me. I felt like about half an hour into the film, this is a very alienating experience, and I feel like I'm being left out of the crowd that's meant to be enjoying this, because I feel that the crowd that would enjoy this is very pretentious. I feel the filmmaking, actually, I take that back. I don't feel that the crowd that would enjoy this is very pretentious, but I feel the filmmaking itself is pretentious. It's aiming itself at a sophisticated audience and all that jazz, and it annoyed me the way that I was doing that, because it was alienating someone like me who really struggles with films that are too arty and films that have this style of filmmaking. I don't know how much I'm making sense there, but I suppose the point I'm making is the film felt too pretentious, and it felt a little Oscar bait as well. It felt like Yorgos Lanthimos was trying to get another Oscar, and he knows he will get... did he win an Oscar before, by the way? I think he won an Oscar for The Favourite. I'm not entirely sure, but it feels like he's trying to get more awards love here, because you've seen this certain style of filmmaking with his films in the past, whether it is The Favourite, whether it is Killing of a Sacred Deer, or what's the other film I forgot to mention? The Lobster as well. I think The Lobster did get some awards love. You know, when he makes his type of movies, when he makes his films, they always have this certain style of filmmaking, and it feels like he does that to appease two critics who are gonna give him all this awards love. And I say that as somebody who admires what he does. I admire his vision. I don't like his vision, but I can admire it. But at the same time, I'm sat there and I'm thinking, it feels very Oscar bait, and it feels again like Yorgos Lanthimos is going to get all this Oscar love because it's his style, and people have liked his style in the past and given him all this Oscar love for his style in the past. I mean, look at The Favourite, how many Oscars did that win? And it feels like he's trying to do that again, and I didn't like that he was trying to do that again. I feel sometimes a filmmaker should just try and make a film and not try and make it Oscar bait. I mean, I felt that Bradley Cooper's Maestro felt Oscar bait. You know, when I rewatched it over the Christmas period, I spoke about that on the channel and I reviewed it a couple of days ago. You know, I felt that Maestro was Oscar bait. But I would much rather watch Maestro over this, because at least it had some relatable parts to it. I was able to get invested in the characters because they felt real. And the world of Maestro felt real. The world of Poor Things felt too unrealistic for me. It felt too fanciful, too fantastical, and it didn't feel tactile enough. You know, I don't mind a fantasy type world. I mean, the world that we see in the world of Poor Things is... I mean, it's a version of the world we live in, because they do go and visit the likes of Paris at one point, and so it is a variation on the real world, but it also is fanciful, and it's a fantastical world, and it's a fantastical world that felt too distant. It felt too distant to me. I couldn't buy into this world. I couldn't get into it, because everything in the film just felt too unrealistic, and I understand that might be the point, but it just didn't work for me. It's all subjective in the end. It just didn't work for me, and I found, as what he mentioned, watching the film a very uncomfortable experience. I liked looking at it. It's a sort of film where if you pause a frame, you'd be like, wow, just look at the amount of work and passion that has gone into that one frame alone. And the amount of thought that has gone into the placement of the camera at that point. It's a sort of film where you can do that, but at the same time, watching it is a really uncomfortable experience. Especially at one point, as early on in the film, Bella... They say, Willem Dafoe says something on the lines, his character says something on the lines of, Bella has the mind of a baby in a woman's body. And so, when you hear that, and then when you see Bella having all the sex throughout the rest of the film, that didn't sit right with me. It didn't sit right with me. Maybe I missed something, but a lot of the film just really didn't sit right with me, even though the parts of it I enjoyed. There is a funny dance sequence involving Emma Stone and Mark Ruffalo. There's a great harrowing sequence towards the end of the film that takes place in this housing estate with Emma Stone as well. I'm not going to go on too much spoilers actually, but there's a great sequence involving something that happens in a housing estate later on in the film, which is very harrowing. And I really liked the very end of the film, the way everything came together. But the film itself it went on and on. You know, I could not wait for it to end. The film is like 2 hours and a half, or maybe just be under 2 hours and a half. I think it's around the 2 hours 20 minute mark. And it really felt like 3 hours for me. It just went on and on and on because it was an uncomfortable viewing experience. I didn't like the style of filmmaking. Yorgos Lanthimos has a vision for his films, and good on him, but I just don't like his vision. And I really struggled to get invested in the story. I didn't like the characters too much. I didn't feel that they were completely well realised either. I didn't feel they were completely realised to the point that I could really think about these characters after the film. And it's a very weird film, a little weird for its own good in my opinion, and I think it is self-indulgent too. I think a lot of this film is Yorgos Lanthimos going, I'm going to do this because people have liked when I've done this in the past. People have liked when I've used this frame in the past. And for me, his films just don't work. And I think Poor Things I think it encapsulates how I feel about Yorgos Lanthimos' films. I admire his vision. I just don't admire the film now. I don't admire the way it makes me feel. Also, and I don't want to talk about this too much because I don't like criticising musical scores, but I am going to criticise this one. I hated the musical score for this film. It made my ears want to bleed at times. It's a unique musical score, and I don't know who did it, but I'll give the person who did it that. It's a unique musical score. I just didn't like it. It made my ears want to bleed at times. Like, oh god. Did not like the musical score, and I did not like the way the film felt for the most part. But there's something to admire about it, and I can see why it's getting all this Oscar love. It's just not for me. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Poor Things, I'm going to say it's a 5 out of 10. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10 because I did not hate the film. If I hated the film, I'd give it like a 3 out of 10 or lower. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10 because I do think, again, there's a lot to like about it. Even if you were someone like me who didn't like the film, you've got to admit there's something in the passion and thought and the design that has gone into the film. You have to admit that. I mean, the costume design is something I haven't mentioned yet. That in itself is, and I never really talk about costume design in the film. The costume design really stands out in this film, and there is so much that I could sit here and go, that works, that works, that works. But for me, it's just his filmmaking style, and it's the way his films feel. They're all very uncomfortable, and I get that might be the point. I completely understand that. The Favourite, when I watched it, was very uncomfortable for me. It was a very uncomfortable viewing. But that still doesn't mean I have to like it. The filmmakers may want a film to be uncomfortable, and they may succeed in making the film uncomfortable, but that still doesn't mean I have to like it though, you know. I think it's uncomfortable, and I think it's meant to be uncomfortable, and I think it's meant to be an uncomfortable viewing experience, and I think that's, you know, I don't like films that are uncomfortable to watch. Let's just say that. I don't like films that are uncomfortable to watch. Yeah. I found this film, I struggled with this film. I found it unengaging. I did not find it compelling. I did not really like any of the characters. Emma Stone is remarkably talented, and her talent shines in this film. And I can completely see her winning the Academy Award at this year's Academy Awards. I think she is, I think she's the one to win it, and I think Mark Ruffalo is very good. So is Wonderful. So is Rami Youssef, and again, there are very good parts to the film, and I like what it's about. I like how it's about Bella breaking free, and I like how it touches on all the themes to do with women's liberation. I like how it's about waking up and seeing what's out there. I like what the film's actually about. I just don't like the directing, and I don't like the way it made me feel, and I don't like how stylized it was. It's too stylized in my opinion. I don't like how arty it was, and I didn't like how pretentious it felt too. It's not for me, but if you loved it, that's great, and I'm dead jealous of you, because I wanted to love it. I really wanted to love it. I just didn't. And so, as I've titled this podcast today, Emma Stone is phenomenal, and she really is, in this otherwise pretentious, over-stylized art film, and that's pretty much how I feel about Poor Things overall. So, all in all, as I've already said, I'm going to say once more that Poor Things is a 5 out of 10 for me. Anyway, guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen Poor Things and you loved it, please let me know why in the comment section below. I always love it when someone loves a film more than I do, or someone even likes a film more than I do. Whatever your thoughts are on Poor Things, please let me know in the comment section below, because I'd love to hear what people thought of this film. Maybe you loved it, maybe you hated it. Whatever your thoughts, let me know in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. And look forward to many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As what he said, thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. And yeah, I'll see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.